It's Thursday, and you know what that means. That means it's time to ignite the dynamite the day after the dynamite. And welcome to Day After Dynamite with Will Washington. I am that Will Washington I just mentioned. And I'm not alone here. I am joined by Fightful Overbooked's own Haley. Haley, thanks for being here on Day After Dynamite.
Thanks for having me, Will. We've been trying to do this for a while, and you had my Tag Talk co-host Kylie on here, so I've been trying to get on the show for a bit.
Yes, and now you're here, and I've completed the. I was gonna say circle, but it's just two people, so it's the Tag Talk tandem. We've completed that here. But thank you for being here on Day After Dynamite. I appreciate you, and thank you everybody for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, just leave us a thumbs up there, real quick. It's a very quick thing to do, and then we're done here as far as that process is concerned. But there's other things if you want to be a part of this show and get your voice heard on this show and help support what we do. You can send us a super chat. YouTube.com/Fightful is the way to send us a super chat, and we've got. Do I have a super chat yet? As an example, I always like to pull one up. Of course I do, because we've got Louisville. Oh, that's cool. Says Swerve should be the person to retire Sting. That's an interesting one. Ryan Lambert says Cole is finally becoming Keith Lee's manager. I've seen that joke quite a bit on Twitter today, and that's a very good one. And I'm pulling up the Humper chats now. I had to close out a bunch of browser tabs because my camera was acting funny. And then also, shout out to the feedback I got on last week's show. So, of course, I have the arcade behind me. It's always been there. But the screen of it has never been in the shot. And I had to move it because of my basement flooding last week. And I got a bunch of people saying to me, hey, it's actually kind of cool. You should keep it that way and then change out the game every week. So today's game, playing behind me, is my all-time favorite fighting game. It's Capcom vs. SNK 2, Mark of the Millennium, 2001. I truly believe the greatest fighter of all time, and that's what's going behind me there. So if you're a Capcom vs. SNK guy, then enjoy that. Do you do the fighting games, Haley?
Sometimes not so much anymore. I used to be really big on video games, but I feel like I need to get back into it.
I mean, no, you don't. It's not anything that's conducive to anyone's life. Like, honestly, if you've moved on with your life, then you should honestly feel good about that.
You know what? That's fair.
Because otherwise, these things have a stranglehold on mine. This is not something, like, honestly, teach me your ways as far as breaking away from these things. Although I will say, I saw this is the first podcast I've done since this past weekend because I didn't get to do After the Week with Denise because Denise has been sick. But this is the first show I've done since Mario came out last week, and that was actually, I thought it was really good. I think it was. As a wrestling fan, I recognize cheap pops when I see them. And that movie is nothing but cheap pops. But also, as a wrestling fan, cheap pops are freaking great. And if you can get your audience to recognize a reference to go for things like that, then honestly, I think they did right by their audience. It's probably not a movie that anybody who doesn't play Mario games should bother with because it's literally just full of references and things to make you go, oh, that's the song from the Mario show when I was a kid. But I thought it was great for literally all of those things. So there's my short review here. And Caden says, not a fan of back-to-back-to-back similar angles. I don't know what you mean, Caden. But I suppose we'll discuss those things. AP sent in a Humper chat. Let's go ahead and pull that up here. AP, thank you for the Humper chat. This one says, one for Dad/Will. Hey, I'm both of those things. Says, hope you're well. There's a lot to like about AEW, but the writing/story arc planning is so frantic. Does TK need to delegate/hire? Felt like Lee/Swerve were thrown in cold. Elite leaving Cutler to get bloodied, illogical, etc. Um, so I suppose I'll talk about the Lee and Swerve stuff in that, of course, that got kicked off at the end of last year when Mogul Affiliates formed, and when was that? That was in December, I believe.
Mhm.
And then it seemed like they were headed toward Revolution. Keith Lee returned on that rampage, and then the match never ended up happening. And then, of course, the rivalry got picked up last night. And my feeling on this at the moment is that it's going to be headed toward Double or Nothing. That they are going to do the singles match between Keith Lee and Swerve and finally blow that feud off. And you've got 6 Dynamites now to do that, and I think that there's more time to do that. I think what it was a case of was a couple of things. I think, and sorry, my Sally Cell's ringing, so we'll go ahead and dodge that call. I don't know who that was, but I think it was a combination of 2 things. One was the Iron Man match taking up so much of Revolution and realizing that the time wasn't going to exist on the pay-per-view to get Keith Lee and Swerve onto that show. So then it became, all right, well, let's then put a pause on that feud. And I also think that we saw, of course, this past Friday, the formation of the Mogul Embassy. And Swerve is now 51% owner of the embassy. He is now flanked by Prince Nana and Brian Cage, which I truly believe is a much better fit as far as he was concerned. I think that it's right now Brian Cage is just a much better heater for him. And I think it's a much better look. And to be honest, I think this was more of a move, in my opinion, of getting the pieces in order as far as Swerve's heel character is concerned, to then move forward with the Keith Lee feud. And I think that's more what that had to do with. And the idea of it, I guess, being thrown in cold, I think this is more reheating it up. I think if they just went into it the way they were going, I think it would have been colder than giving them both some more TV time and then moving forward with it, giving them now we've got 6 weeks to go toward Double or Nothing, rather than, I think when Keith Lee returned, it was only going to be that was only 2 weeks before Revolution. Had that ended up on the Revolution card, I think they would have had far less time to do what they want to do with it. So I know there is plans for that, and so we'll see how that all shakes out. Anonymous sent one in, and this one simply just says, and thank you, Anonymous, for your super chat. It says, everyone shut up. Tootie's fighting Miyu Yamashita in May, but first she has to beat Heather Reckless's tiny ass in a 2 out of 3 falls match on the 30th. Is that one from Van Twinblade? Sounds like it is. But either way, and we've got some others. They're just piling in now.
I see them rolling in.
Yep. We got Corey says, great run of episodes from AEW. I feel Punk returning puts an invisible timer for when he derails the entire show for a 3rd time. Hope I'm wrong. Last year says, the women's tag match next week in Pittsburgh has to be the main event with Cheetah returning. She's ready and the story moves forward there, right? I mean, my gut is that it's all going to center around Britt, that they're in Pittsburgh. It's her story. That's my thought there. And Vasco says, will heel turn on games? Watch the new Zelda. I saw that the trailer dropped for Zelda. And look, I'm not turning heel on games. I love gaming. I just recognize that it hasn't exactly been a productive use of my time, but I love it. Are you kidding me? There's literally an arcade right behind me. There's a joystick on my desk. I have multiple controllers. I bought a Stadia controller. All right. I didn't buy this. I actually got it for free. Thank you, Google. But I literally tried Stadia. There's right. There we go, I think. But anyway, the amount of time and energy I've spent gaming is far more than I would like to. But again, it's something I enjoy, and I appreciate that people enjoy it. It's a thing I get to give to my kids as well, and we all have fun with the stuff we play. So, game on. I still truly believe in gaming. It's just not a productive use of my time. Shame Monster says, catching dad because I'm off. After 5.5 hours of wrestling in Milwaukee last night and home at 2 a.m., no voice. TK's a maniac for throwing more Ring of Honor tapings after Rampage with Vikingo versus Gringo Loco. I heard about that. I asked about that in the media scrum, the ROH media scrum, last what was that, just 2 weeks ago. It was 2 weeks ago tomorrow. And I asked about what the taping schedule was going to end up being, and he mentioned that it's going to be a bit of a hybrid. I think it's going to be tough to continue taping Ring of Honor at TV, and I don't know when the next Orlando set of tapings is going to be. I think that's the better home for Ring of Honor for sure. I just don't know when that's going to be, but that's, I think, where it ideally needs to get back to, especially for those solo tapings. I think that the solo tapings for Ring of Honor were the best ones because you had a crowd that was there for Ring of Honor. Do you watch much Ring of Honor, Haley?
I do. I used to be a big fan of like the old Ring of Honor, but I've really been getting into it now that it's been relaunched and I took hold of it. I like it. I like the presentation a lot.
How do you feel about the arena taped episodes versus the ones taped at Universal?
See, I'm a bigger fan of like smaller like venues. Because I like that independent show feel, and that's kind of why I've always liked Ring of Honor. But I mean, it's fine. Like, I guess I don't feel any certain way, but I do like the smaller kind of arena look better, or venue.
Right. Gaming from Canada, which I knew Gaming from Canada would say this, saying, blasphemy, gaming is a great use of time, except Stadia, though, can't condone that. Hey, I'll say this. After they shut down Stadia, they put out a patch for this controller that basically turns it in just to a standard Bluetooth controller. Works great. I've been using it for everything. I can use it now in Steam, and it works just fine for pretty much anything. I use it with emulators. It's actually, the placement of the analog sticks is very PlayStation-y, so if I want to use it for a PlayStation emulator, it's great stuff. So it's a good controller, and now that I have an actual use for it, I can actually use it. So that's great. But yeah, I think as far as the smaller venue is concerned, I think to me, it's just, I would like to see an audience that's there for Ring of Honor. I think when you sell AEW tickets, you're going to have more of an AEW audience that's looking for more of a TV-based product, versus Ring of Honor, which obviously has lesser known names. And on top of that is more of it's you're going to get longer matches. It's almost pay-per-view style in the way it presents itself. And so I think when you have an audience that's there for that, that's also prepared for sitting there for 5 hours, I think that can turn out better for that audience. And I think that's what they need to do with those. We got another one here from GF1. It says that, here we go. Thank you, GF1. Says, for all the CM Punk defenders that claim he's such a good guy, this gonna sound degrading, but most women in the business are rat CM Punk 2005. All right, look, I'm not in the mode of like canceling people for stuff said in 2005. We were talking 18 years ago. Also, CM Punk was, I don't remember the context of that. I remember it being said, and I remember it being said because, surprise, surprise, I've been at this 18 years. I was podcasting at that time when CM Punk was running the straight edge character in doing the Summer of Punk stuff for Ring of Honor 2005. But either way, I'm the wrong guy to be pulling up old quotes and dissecting people's character over them. The only thing I ever want to do with old quotes is ask people, do they stand by that now? Give them a chance to not. Because I know that I'm not the same person I was 18 years ago, and I can't imagine anybody on this planet is the same person they were 18 years ago. But that's
because I was 5 years old, so
Thank you for aging me, by the way. I appreciate that.
I had to.
Yeah, please do. Pablo says, "Good afternoon, Will and Haley. I popped for the Sting nostalgia as well as the more cowbell reference. Bold prediction: a New Japan signed wrestler wins the international title either at Forbidden Door or in the weeks leading up to it. Who could it be? I don't know if wins it, but I think maybe challenges for it. But I think there's plenty of people just on the roster that you could have, with the run that Orange Cassidy's been on. I think there's plenty of people on the roster you could end up handing that off to. So I'm not of the belief that it should be somebody outside the roster. But I get why you would want that. Bored Dude says, don't turn your back on the Wolf Pack. You might wind up in a body bag. Sting is the man, and we are lucky to still have him around. He's better than Taker. Look, I believe that because I've been a Sting fan my whole life. I also, as I tweeted yesterday, I literally just bought an NWO Wolfpack shirt, just ordered it online. And so when Sting referenced the Wolfpack and referenced being red and black Sting, gave a shout out to Kevin Nash and a shout out to Scott Hall. Thought that was great. And so, yeah, that definitely tickled my heart a little bit. But let's talk about the old CM Punk. And Caden, by the way, says, selfishly, I want tapings at Universal. Of course you do, Caden.
Yeah,
but you should get them. I do believe you should get them, Caden. Let's talk about CM Punk. Some rumors going around. I'll just say that I am of the belief that there is substance to the rumors this time around. That, Sean dropped what I felt was a pretty big story, but I saw some people kind of harping on him saying this isn't new information. But the idea that Punk is willing to come back and he's willing to work with some people. Before Dynamite happened, I maybe heard about some dates. And Sean's going to publish some more details about that at FightfulSelect.com today. So I'm not in any position to, I guess, want to steal his thunder on that. So I'm not going to do that. But he talked, but I've heard some things around a certain June 21st date. I'd heard that before Dynamite. And some announcements coming from AEW next month, that those should be kind of a big deal. And a lot of it's around stuff that people have been asking about. So that's, look for that next month. But as far as that June 21st date, I had kind of, I guess in cheeky fashion, tweeted that, gee, it's been a long time. And I guess you can't really convey tone in a tweet, but I tweeted, gosh, it's been a real long time since AEW's been to Chicago. As a matter of fact, this is the longest stretch they've been without a Chicago show. And everybody responding to it was like, yeah, fuck Chicago. And I'm like, that's not where I was going with that. I was kind of trying to imply that maybe a Chicago show maybe they're due for one. And no, instead I got a lot of people who are like, yeah, they shouldn't go to Chicago. Chicago sucks. They go to Chicago all the time. And I thought, I'm just going to let this tweet sit here and let everybody do what they're going to do with that one. But the tone I was going for when I tweeted that was more of a, gee, been a long time since there's been a Chicago show. I thought my shrugging emoji got the emotion there behind that, but I guess not. And so yeah, there is a Chicago show coming up, Wintrust Arena, that is kind of become a bit of a second home for AEW in Chicago. That of course AEW has run the Now Arena, which is actually in Hoffman Estates. It's nowhere near. I mean, it's not nowhere near, but it's 30 minutes outside Chicago. Yeah, it's far enough away to where it's gonna cost you a lot in a hefty Uber to get anywhere. So pretty much since Revolution, though, when they want to run main Chicago area, when they want to be in downtown Chicago, they run Wintrust Arena. And then when they have a major event happening like the First Dance or Forbidden Door, or as rumor has it, this year's All Out, that's when they do United Center. But their kind of go-to is Wintrust Arena. I like Wintrust Arena a lot. I think it is, I just think it's structurally a very pretty arena. I think it was built in 2017, right? I don't even think it's that old. I think based on the ages of the arenas, and correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but I think it's United Center was built in 94. The Now Arena was 2006. Wintrust is 07. And the Allstate Arena, which WWE runs, is like the 80s, right? Something like that. Because they used to be the Rosemont Horizon. Now it's the Allstate Arena, but I'm pretty sure that was built in the 80s. And so Wintrust, being a WNBA venue, does have the benefit of being one of the newer arenas. And I don't know. I think that's probably a good venue to maybe do some cool things at. Who knows? But stay tuned to Fightful Select for stuff like that. And yeah, I see somebody in the chat said that United was 1994 because SummerSlam 1994 was the first major event there. Yes, I do recall that. And either way, it's Chicago. And there's going to be some things happening there. Is my feeling. That's the rumor going around. And there'll probably be some other details around what ends up happening at that arena. As far as a potential return for CM Punk, Haley, how do you feel about this?
I'm a big CM Punk fan. So, I feel like at this point, like, the dust has settled. A lot of people are over it. And I wouldn't be mad about it. I think that he brings a lot of value to AEW just in face and name alone. And I do think that there are a lot of stories that I still would like to see him to tell. And I do think that if you can, you should be able to go out on your own terms. And I don't think that, when everything happened, like, that was it for him to begin with. So I do think that he should get to finish his story how he kind of intended and wants to.
Well, I guess we shall see what happens. I don't know if he'll necessarily get to tell his story the way he wants to, because at the end of the day, he definitely, in his departure, made some enemies. And there's going to be consequences as far as that's concerned, I think. And the consequences will end up being that there's going to be a probably faction of the locker room that doesn't want to work with him. And I think that that's just ultimately going to be the case. And hopefully, as time goes on, as Punk maybe reassimilates into things a little bit more, some of that will start to die down. Some of the, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the detractions from CM Punk will start to diminish if he can kind of make his way into being a part of the roster again. I feel like I've just always felt like the and sorry, my group chat's going off with Reg and Phil right now because there's stuff in there that can't be out right now, but there's definitely laughs to be had. I'm personally of the belief that I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And granted, that's bitten me in the rear a lot. That I've been a lot of times called naive because I want to give kind of everyone the chance to prove that they're as good or as bad as they might claim. So to me, I'm like, hopefully he can see the error of what went wrong there. And hopefully everybody involved can see the error of what went wrong there and just move past it and move forward. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, and you could hear it in Tony's voice when he was promoting All Out last year, that the thing he wanted more than anything else was this upcoming roster. He, I believe, said that after All Out, we're going to have the greatest roster ever assembled in professional wrestling. And that could have been a true statement at that time, thinking about the idea of a roster that contained CM Punk, MJF, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Bryan Danielson, like thinking about what he was prepared to have in a roster after All Out last year. And he had one show with them. And then all of a sudden it was actually CM Punk's out, got to suspend all 3 members of the Elite. And that idea of a dream roster, even thinking about last year, he almost had it last year, but Kenny was injured. And now all of a sudden, now Switchblade Jay White is in play now. Now you've since signed Swerve last year, you signed Keith Lee last year. Like there's a lot of other changes. Konosuke Takeshita, a lot has been added to that roster, but you still don't quite have all of the star elements that he thought he was going to have last year. And I think that's still the ideal scenario, is having this roster with these guys. That just sounds awesome. I hope he gets it one day. I do. I hope to see it just as a fan. But who knows? Who knows if we just have to see. Speaking of benefit of the doubt, speaking of giving people chances, have to talk about another thing that we kind of caught wind of at Fightful a little bit before Dynamite. I like to say I am not in the business of spoilers. I say this all the time. And so this is one of those, like, publish this piece of information as close to the show as possible. And then on top of that, on Twitter, I was fairly vague. And I know people hate when wrestling inside people tend to be vague about things. But I'm like, look, I'm not going to spoil things. But all I'm going to say is that there's going to be a ton of discourse following the show. And boy, was I right.
I had to log off.
So I tweeted about, and guys are bringing up Claudio, by the way. There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys who have come in that could make this appear to be one of the best rosters ever. But so I had tweeted that there's going to be a lot of discourse. And then I said, just don't feed the trolls on this. They don't actually care. And they're concerned trolling. But there's probably an actual discussion that needs to be had. Now, I'm not necessarily the guy to know if I'm right to have that discussion, because ultimately, I'm not one of his peers, not one of his family members. I am an outside observer. But I'm, of course, referring to the fact that Jeff Hardy returned on the show last night. Jeff Hardy, of course, was arrested for DUI last year, and he was subsequently, I believe it was an indefinite suspension, and he entered rehab. And I believe Tony's statement even said at the time that his return was contingent on his completion of rehab, things along those lines. Matt Hardy has talked about how much better he's doing. Really quick, I want to address one quick thing. This here, James Jones says, Elite is most of the problem, IMO. I mean, in your opinion, the issue, of course, there is you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know what's going on with any of that, and what necessarily triggered all of that. So I called out that statement basically to say that I think it's fully incorrect to pull or to pick a side without knowing all of the details. Because if you only know what's transpired on screen, you really only know the media scrum from All Out last year, the Gripe Bomb, as we've dubbed it, and some of the details from Brawl Out. So there's that piece of that. But anyway, as far as Jeff Hardy's concerned, Jeff Hardy is back, and he is back in play. They've resumed the Hardy Boys as a tag team. Sean published some details about this on Fightful Select, and so we'll talk a little bit more about how that all goes. How are you feeling about having Jeff Hardy back?
Look, I love Jeff a lot. The Hardy Boys are the reason that I fell in love with tag team wrestling, and why I have a show on Fightful Overbooked about it. But at the same time, I don't know. I just hope that he's really okay, and that like you said, we don't know him personally. We don't know like any details or anything like that. But I do wish him well, and I'm happy to see him back. He looks really healthy. He looks good. But yeah.
I think a lot about what Moxley said last year about taking things day by day. Moxley talked about his sobriety, and when I say last year, I mean a couple weeks ago on the Renee podcast, but it was about last year.
Mm-hmm.
But he talked about why he was working without a contract, and he said because at that moment he was feeling good, and then but his concern was that he felt like he could potentially fall into bad habits, and he didn't know what that meant. And so he didn't want to commit to anything because he's feeling good now, but 6 weeks from now, he could not be feeling good. And knowing people who have struggled with addiction, I recognize that there is a day-by-day change that can happen with things like that. That in this current moment, Jeff Hardy could be fine. And it's like, but if he were to, say, slip up in 6 months or even 6 years, people are going to look back and go, see, we told you he wasn't fine back then. And it's like, but that's how quickly things can change with people. And that's not to say that there wasn't a goal in making sure that he was all right before. And I think things are far, when you're dealing with people in addiction, things are far less binary than people think they are. People always just think you're either the problem or you're not. You're either a problem or you're not. And if you are a problem, you can never not be a problem. And I think that there is some in between. And that's why I'm never one to write anybody off in those instances where, yeah, Jeff Hardy has had numerous. Look, I've been doing this 18 years. And when I say I've been doing this 18 years, that means I've seen Jeff Hardy stories pretty much going back to the beginning of my podcast run. And even before that, I knew about certain Jeff Hardy things. That was kind of just a lot of the stories that surrounded Jeff Hardy, especially through his 20s. And so that is... So, like I said, I'm not stupid. I'm not saying that, obviously there's pattern behaviors, but I am saying that at this point, let the guy take it day by day. Yeah. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I think people also have to remember that, addiction is a lifelong battle. And like you said, you have to take it day by day. Some days are easier than others. And, I just wish him well. I really hope, he's all good.
Yeah. And I see the points you guys are making in the chat. I get that. And so, of course, those are things that, obviously have to be worked on as far as, one, staying sober, two, taking correct measures in terms of not putting yourself behind the wheel, things along those lines. Those are things he's going to have to do, and things he's going to have to work on. And that's how I see anything along those lines. But ultimately, I'm not here to make that decision for Jeff as far as whether or not he should be back. But it seems like Twitter has ultimately decided that they are judge, jury, and executioner on everybody. And again, the world has far more nuance than that. You can't be. But let's talk about some other things, such as Nelson Muntz. I don't think that's your real name, Nelson. But at least the Simpsons fan in me knows that it's not. If it is, that's cool. Nelson says, for all American wrestling fans, the only real draws for Wembley on name alone are Sting and Jericho. Most people in Europe have no clue who CM Punk is. okay, that's probably a fact that most people in Europe have no clue who CM Punk is. But I think it's false to say that he wouldn't draw for that building. And that the goal for drawing to Wembley isn't going to be to draw every European. That's just not plausible. But it is to draw as many wrestling fans as you can. And I think that if you can draw wrestling fans who are of the idea that one of their favorites could be there, then that works. And I think that, again, you're talking about household name versus draw. Those aren't necessarily the same thing. As long as they will put an ass in the seat, that's somebody that can be considered a draw. And I think that, look, we've seen the numbers that CM Punk does put asses in seats. And so there's that. Yeah, like, because I agree with what Snap Grapple Pop says, which is most people don't, because wrestling is niche, but most wrestling fans will know who CM Punk is. It's an easy way to look at that. But we had AEW Dynamite took place Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There's a couple of production notes I want to note about the show. First off, did the show sound different to you yesterday?
A little bit, but I couldn't like pinpoint why.
There was a change in the mix. And the main thing that you should have noticed right off the bat was that the direct feed of theme music was way louder than it normally is. Mm-hmm. And so the theme songs were almost drowning everything out. You almost immediately hear, as the show starts, you hear the Dynamite theme song playing, and you hear commentary trying to talk over it, and they're talking in their normal cadence, but the theme song is almost completely drowning them out. And then Darby Allin's music hits, same deal. It's much louder of a mix than you hear, because again, it's the direct feed audio. And so I think a lot of people mistook that for it being a lower crowd than usual and not a different mix than usual. But it legit was. It was, if you're listening to it, you're hearing direct audio to your speakers of Darby Allin's theme. You're hearing direct audio of Swerve's theme to your speakers, which I think for the most part can tend to be a good thing. WWE uses direct audio a lot, but theirs is definitely better balanced in terms of playing you direct audio and then feeding the crowd audio on top of that, and it sounds like a better mix than feeding it through arena speakers. But this week, like I said, the music was drowning everything out. It was drowning out the commentary, I thought. It was drowning out the I thought it was drowning out the crowd. I thought you really couldn't hear much of anything except the theme music. And so that was just kind of hard. And I know that was apparently, I talked to some people that said that was just kind of a production decision, that as far as trying to come up with a new balance for the audio. And I think it's just going to take some time to find that right balance, because I think they do need to bring the volume up on theme music. I think that's something people have said they've wanted forever. But it's just, I think in this instance, the music somehow overpowered the show rather than feeling like it was a part of it. So keep working on that is what I'll say. Because I think that's a hard thing to test. I think that's a hard thing to test without having the crowd actually there. Because you can think you have all the right levels, and then once you have the crowd in the building, all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, this isn't what we needed. So it's going to be a thing that is just going to need to take some time. But I would say, if I were AEW, I would err on the side of always bring the crowd audio up, because I think, to me, professional wrestling needs the crowd audio more than it needs anything else. But the show kicked off with Darby Allin one-on-one with his longtime rival Swerve Strickland. We get a little bit of background as far as why this is. We saw Swerve from last Friday's Rampage make his big announcement. This is the first time I guess I've gotten to talk about this on Day After Dynamite, that the big announcement was that he has purchased the embassy, 51% of the embassy. And they are now the Mogul Embassy. They didn't have that name on Rampage, but they made sure to hammer that name into your head this week on Dynamite. And I like the fit as far as the embassy with Swerve. I think it's a much better fit for him, to be honest, than I thought the Mogul affiliates were. I didn't mind the look of the Mogul affiliates, but I do recognize that there was work that needed to be done there. I had never seen Trench as a performer, so I was never willing to be the guy to be like, oh, he's awful. I don't know that. I know a lot of people had kind of decided that. They're like, hey, face guy with tattoos, he sucks. And I thought, okay, I don't know. He's trained with Jay Lethal. Couldn't be that bad, but I know he got hurt, so that is kind of what it is. Parker, on the other hand, I think we did see in the ring, and I think kind of everybody's made up their mind about Parker. So I don't know what the future with Parker holds, but either way, Brian Cage behind Swerve, I think, is just a better fit. And as Fightful Select confirmed, Brian Cage did re-sign with AEW, so this isn't one of those things that where there's any questions as far as what the future holds with him. And of course, he's going to have the Gates of Agony with him as well. And I freaking love the Gates of Agony.
Yeah.
So there's that. And yeah, and then of course there's all the history with Darby and Swerve. If you watched what is it, Road 2 this week? Did you watch that the video package for Swerve and Darby?
I didn't get a chance, no.
It was really good. It was very good. And they talked about their history and going back to the Indies, and I think Swerve cut a really good promo on Darby, basically talking about how there is no Darby Allin without Swerve Strickland. He put Darby on the map. He created Darby in everything he did throughout the Indies to torture Darby, and all of the battles they had, those helped make Darby the performer he is today. So in a way, he's Dr. Frankenstein here in a way. So here we had Swerve Strickland versus Darby Allin. I thought this match was great. I think this was a great opener. I thought Darby has needed to have this match going into his title match. And then also, we haven't seen Swerve on Dynamite since, what was it, January 4th? When he had the match with AR Fox. And I thought he was in need of a performance in front of this audience. And I was a big fan. I liked that Darby and Swerve are kind of, there's a style that they're known for. And they could have very much gone for that. But I appreciated that in this match, they did a little bit of it. But I thought that telling the story around Swerve's ankle was, or just his foot in general, I think gave us a very different match than we've seen between the two of them. How did you feel about the match?
I enjoyed it, and we got some biting, but yeah, I really enjoyed the match, and like you were talking about, like Swerve's presentation, I'm really enjoying it so far. I like you had kind of mentioned, but I like this version of him a lot more than what they were doing previously. So I'm definitely excited to kind of see where that goes. But I do agree about Darby kind of needing some steam, and I do think that pairing him with Swerve in this capacity was a really good idea, and it made me want to see more of them. Definitely.
Good. Well, as a matter of fact, I'm going to read some super chats because Mac from BK says, I liked the Mogul Embassy. I knew that Darby had to win as they're building up the pillars, but Swerve shouldn't have been put in that position to lose. I've seen that take a lot. And in a vacuum, I can say I don't think that's incorrect. Outside of a vacuum, I'll just say wait and see, which I know is a thing people hate to hear, but my gut tells me that there's more to that, and maybe let that play out. And again, I know that's people's least favorite phrase when they come across something they don't like. Uh, and I hate that phrase. But in this case,
But sometimes it really does apply, you know?
Yeah, well, and there's a story. And I mean, there's a story in a couple of ways. I've talked about the fact that my favorite thing in pro wrestling in general, and I'm really glad that Tony has started to adopt this, is when a story threads throughout the show, when it's not just segment, 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 and none of the segments have any relation. I like there's when there's a theme. You know, I was a big fan of the Dynamite in Independence, Missouri a month ago with, you know, opening up with the Bucks being put on the shelf by the BCC, and then in the middle of the show, you know, Kenny wanting to go after them and Don Callis telling him to focus on singles action. And then in the main event, you have Kenny trying to focus on a singles action with Vikingo, but then the Blackpool Combat Club interferes, and then Hangman comes in. And like the fact that that story went all throughout the show and was brought up at multiple points, I think is the way I love a professional wrestling show to tell itself. And, you know, my favorite episodes of Raw have always had a story thread throughout, because that's the kind of thing that keeps me interested. And I like getting to the end of the show and feeling like, okay, that payoff from the beginning of the show, or I'm being paid off from the beginning of the show, or even the middle of the show. And this week, something different was tried, and that Swerve was that theme throughout the show, that he opened the show, then he had the middle segment where he was reminded, I still have some unfinished business. And then at the end of the show, we saw him later, and we'll talk about that here. So there's more. But to me, I thought that the highlight of this show is the segment between MJF, Darby Allin, and Sting. This magnificent segment. I think we know what to expect from MJF and things like this. And so it's almost not surprising. But I think Darby has come off very surprising in these segments. I think that, you know, of course, we had the first one with the pillars, and where they all demanded their title shot and everybody got to say their piece. And I think everybody came away from that surprised that Darby really owned that segment, I thought. And Darby really had the most to say, and it was all very pointed. In this case, I think same deal. Darby going face-to-face, toe-to-toe with MJF and fairly holding his own, I think, is a testament to how much better he's getting at this and how good he is with this. And I thought this was good.
Yeah, I did too. And I think one of the things that I really enjoy about Darby is that when he's speaking, like it just feels like, oh, that's Darby. Like, it doesn't feel like character Darby. Like, it just feels like Darby, the human being. And so I feel like I've always really resonated with kind of the way that he goes into promos. But I've really enjoyed, like, the past two, like you had mentioned. And I do think that, like, this Four Pillars feud that they have going on, I think that they're all stepping their game up. Jack Perry, too. I really enjoyed the last promo that he gave.
Yeah, I mean, so what was the last? Oh yeah, he had the face-to-face with MJF like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, that was actually really good. Pretty much the only person who hasn't had a face-to-face with MJF right now is Sammy Guevara. And to be honest, and I like Sammy, I think he'd get chewed to pieces. I think he would be the one to kind of fall apart here. But again, I think there's kind of an expectation that Darby, because he hasn't had much to say, doesn't have much to say. And in this case, I liked everything he said here, that he asked MJF if he's happy. And he said, you know, you said to me 6 years ago, wrestling in front of 30 people, that when I make it on national TV, I'm going to be happy. But here you are, the same miserable dude that you were back then. And for me, I went to therapy because I didn't want to be this guy who is, you know, fake on the outside, but crumbling on the inside. And he said, I learned that happiness comes when your people are taken care of. And he talked about buying his parents a house and helping his dad retire. And Then he segued that well because he was like, and I meant my actual dad, not the guy you call my dad, Sting, because Sting's not my dad, but he's the best friend that I've made in this business. Which I also always think is interesting because they're like 40 years apart in age. But like, it is interesting to see Sting make his way into the Pillars feud because all these guys are in their 20s. And in 20 years ago, Sting was like, not that to me 20 years ago. So let's think about this. 20 years ago would be 2003. So like Sting was already making appearances in TNA at this point. He was already kind of past his prime, and but he still gets to remind us that he's a legend to this generation, particularly to my generation. If you were a wrestling fan and you're in your 30s right now, God, Sting is the guy. And I loved Sting here. Sting making his way to the ring. I wasn't sure where it was going because, like, look, Sting's in his 60s, and you know when he grabs the mic, he can be good, but he can also be corny. And I wasn't sure what he was about to do. And when he pulled out the pom-poms, I was like, oh no, don't be corny, Sting. But he turned it around. He said, I'm more like a cheerleader than a daddy. And he threw the pom-poms at him. And then he said that he didn't want to talk about Cody Daycare. And, oh, I'm sorry. Was I not supposed to say that name? Cody? Oh, that's right, because you had a cheerleader here too. Cody Rhodes was your cheerleader. Just like Darby has his, who's me. And he mentioned how, at this stage of his career, he has no desire to become AEW World Champion. But he looked over at Darby and he said, but he can, and he will. And he said, Showtime's almost over, folks. We know that. Sting's talked for a while that this is the last year of his career. And he said for Darby, it's going to be Showtime. And then Darby said he's going to win the AEW World Championship. And then MJF spit in his face and walked off. It was a little long, but I enjoyed every bit of this. I just think that MJF is, when he gets to do segments like this, I think he delivers when he gets to be pointed with his opponents. And I think when he gives a babyface an opportunity to step up, and the babyface did, that always looks good. I think, Ricky Starks kind of had this last year where Ricky Starks was paired in there with MJF. And Ricky Starks, it was basically sink or swim, and Ricky Starks swam. And yeah, Jungle Boy a couple weeks ago did. I think MJF gets to be a really great litmus test for baby faces who get to be in this atmosphere. Now, everybody is saying that Sean dropped the Punk story, and I want to be sure of what's in that before I blab or talk about things like that. And Sean, I know you tend to be paying attention, so if you want to drop in and give any updates on that, please feel free. And if you want to point anybody in that direction, Sean, again, the floor is yours to do so. So either way, I like this opening segment a lot. I think just everything. I think this first half hour of Dynamite, I looked up and it was 32 minutes in, and I went, yep, I am good with this. This was a great way to start the show.
I agree.
So we also then saw one Powerhouse Hobbs defending his TNT title against Silas Young. I thought this was going to be a friggin' match.
I just...
Why did we not get a match here? I mean, I get why. I'll say that I think Powerhouse Hobbs needs more definitive squashes at this stage of his reign. I've even heard from some people in AEW, actually, that thought that his first 2 matches were too competitive, that they thought that maybe he probably should have been more dominant before getting into some I guess more even grounded matches with guys like Rey Fenix and Penta. But either way, he and I guess the part I was kind of put off by was that it was Silas Young. I was like, oh man, that's his Dynamite showing. That's too bad.
I know.
And you know what's funny is my son said this like a week ago when the first time he saw Powerhouse Hobbs in the car, and Billy went, "Oh, Wardlow's going to destroy that." An 8-year-old picked up that that's where this was going,
Hmm.
and
I love.
yeah, he was like, "Oh, it's because they broke into Wardlow's car, so Wardlow's going to destroy his car." This was like 2 weeks ago, and sure enough, my son was absolutely correct. 100%. This boy is 8, and he got it. He as soon as it happened, I wanted to give my son his credit. And hold on, reading a couple of other super chats. Orion Bin 666 says, "Folks, make sure your vehicle is in park before leaving." No, that was the best part.
I was a little nervous at first when I saw it moving, but like now I can laugh about it now that I know like everything's good and everybody's okay, nobody got hurt or anything. But it was the best part of this thing.
I mean, no, Wardlow not budging. So what we're of course talking about is the fact that Wardlow destroyed Powerhouse Hobbs' car, and then he used the forklift to flip it over, but left the car in gear, or left the forklift in gear. So when he got out, the forklift then just ran into the car. Honestly, I thought that was great. I think Wardlow not budging and just kind of looking at it and watching it happen, I think made it even better. I think had he like even hesitated for half a second and given like an "oh shit, what did I just do?" would have looked way worse. But the fact that he just didn't care and it just ran off, and then he's like, "All right, that's done," and then made his way out to the ring, I thought was great stuff. And then yeah, let somebody else catch up to it after. Like if it actually had kept running, let somebody run after that. So what did you think of this angle, Haley?
Well, I really liked the forklift stuff. I thought it was great TV. I guess my only worry with running Hobbs and Wardlow is it going to derail Wardlow more if he loses? And like I want Hobbs to have a long reign as a champion. So then if he loses and Wardlow wins, are we just going to get back in like a flip-flop thing with the title? So I guess I'm not really down for that either.
Yeah, I had that kind of same slight concern because they just announced that the match is happening next week. And right now, can Wardlow afford to lose again is a question. And also, can Hobbs afford to lose this early into his run? And so it is a bit of a lose-lose situation. And I hope they have a smart out for it, because ideally, I would just have Wardlow win, or not Wardlow, Hobbs win and win clean. But again, like Wardlow's already lost so much, can he afford another one? So I agree with you in that sense. I would like to see this feud kind of extend a little bit longer. I'm surprised that they just did this angle and then announced the match. So no, I'm with you on that. We got a couple more super chats, and I want to read this one from, let's see. Hang on, I didn't want to leave this behind. Redmond, who says, "As a Brit, we need to end this idea that All In needs UK talent or legends to sell tickets. We want to see AEW and the AEW talent. AEW is the draw. What if the Brit they gave you was Baker?" I'm sorry. Dad jokes. I'm done here. As a matter of fact, that's it, folks. That's it for this edition of After Dynamite. Peace. No, but seriously, like, obviously, there's going to be British talent that they're going to need to showcase. I think that putting Jamie Hayter as the kind of spokesperson for the event is a good idea. I think having her there has been a good idea. I think putting Pac on the ads is a good idea. But yeah, when people are like, hey, maybe this can be like a hybrid AEW New Japan Rev Pro show. And I'm like, no, like AEW's name is on the marquee for a reason. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, the idea of Will Ospreay being on the show, because I'm seeing everybody kind of saying, hey, what's Will Ospreay going to do here? But I think we kind of should get away from the idea of this being like a Forbidden Door type show. This isn't that show. It's AEW All In. It's not AEW New Japan All In. I know people will cite, but the original All In was a show where it was multiple people from multiple promotions kind of coming together. We saw multiple titles on the line that were represented in different promotions. Hell, the NWA title was on the line. Cody won the NWA title at that show. I get it from that perspective, but I also see that this is promoted as AEW's first time there. And every slot that you fill with somebody that's not from the AEW roster is a chance for somebody from that roster to be missing from it. And I think that the AEW roster deserves the opportunity to sell this show on their own. Now, there's certain guys that are a part of the AEW roster, like CM Punk. He is a part of that roster. He should be. So that's one where I can see him being a part of it. But for the most part, I agree. I think this show needs to be sold on the AEW roster. And thank you, everybody, for booing my joke. I appreciate every single one of you. So let's see. Hunter says, last night's Dynamite was actually really good. I read reports that Jeff was backstage, but I had no clue he was going to be on the show. I sincerely hope we get the Hardys as World Tag Team Champs before their career is over. I don't know if I want them as tag champs. I know they were supposed to win it last year. But, okay, so the story's out. So, Haley, go ahead, talk to the audience for a second while I make sure I don't say anything stupid here.
Oh, no, let's not do that. All right.
Let's see. All right, this is mostly, all right, it's all stuff that I knew.
We're good to talk about it?
I don't know if we're great to talk about it per se, but yeah.
I don't like that.
Either way, let's see. I'm just seeing Punk to return that show, or at least around it. Yeah. So, again, just subscribe. FightfulSelect.com. There's some good details there. And again, Punk's return is, I mean, you see the title of the story. CM Punk's return tentatively planned by AEW. I think that, look, if you go back to this show, going back to September, I had John Alba sitting next to me on this show. And my feeling back then was that CM Punk, he was eventually, I've always felt like cooler heads would prevail. Now, I'm not of the belief that the cooler heads have prevailed yet. I don't necessarily know that all of those details are fully ironed out at this moment. I don't know that everybody's happy that CM Punk is coming back. But I think that at this point, he's a guy that's signed to your roster. He is a part of the roster. He is a part of All Elite Wrestling. And at this stage, moving forward while continuing to pay him, I think is not a good idea. So maybe some people are going to be happy that Punk's back. Maybe some people aren't. But regardless, I think you should make money off of every single one of those things. And I saw somebody say CM Punk has never taken responsibility for anything in AEW. I don't know. Give him an opportunity to. Or again, this might just be me being naive because this is the way I look at people. This is how I always operate. I always give people the benefit of the doubt. And granted, like I said, I have been bitten many, many times by people I shouldn't have trusted. So, but that's just the way I'm always going to operate. And give me just a second. I am trying to pull up a super chat here that is actually related, because David Reed says, Punk won't change. Tiger never changes his stripes. It's a good thing we're talking about human beings and not tigers here.
That's true. That's true.
So what else happened on Dynamite? Again, keep reading. And I see somebody saying, put Punk on the ROH brand. I promise you, for what CM Punk is being paid, Ring of Honor does not make enough money to justify that. And that's not even like an insult. Literally, Tony Khan was even talking about that when, who was that? Steve Fall in the media scrum asked if Goldberg was going to be in Ring of Honor at some point. And Tony Khan kind of gave an answer of, no, he doesn't fit the model of what Ring of Honor is. Now, maybe CM Punk can make an appearance there, but that's not going to happen. So we got the announcement of a new Bullet Club. Mm-hmm. Bullet Club Gold. Jay White announced that he is in AEW, and I mean, we knew he was in AEW, but he made his intentions known, and that him and Juice Robinson are now Bullet Club Gold. I don't know. What do you think of this, Haley?
It sounds like a subscription to something, you know? Like, when I heard him say it, I was like, it sounds like a subscription. Like, that's all I could think about, like, the whole time. I don't know.
See, my thought, unfortunately, was Global Force Gold from 10 years ago when Jeff Jarrett tried to launch Global Force Wrestling, but then did the whole Global Force Gold thing, and that turned out to kind of just be another one of those gold collection schemes. I don't know how I feel about Bullet Club continuing in AEW separate from New Japan Pro Wrestling. I think that what's interesting to me about Bullet Club was that in 2016, as you know, there was a big sub-faction of the Bullet Club called the Elite. And they became kind of the most important part of the Bullet Club through the years that they were tied to the Bullet Club. And it was only in 2018 that the Elite broke off from the Bullet Club, but literally it was basically the Elite members of the Bullet Club were the Elite. And it started as just the Bucks and Kenny, and then they brought in Hangman, they brought in Cody, they brought in Marty, and again, sub-faction of the Bullet Club. But I said all this to say that you kind of got, at that time, the most important part of the Bullet Club. Like, at that point, it wasn't like anybody goes, oh, well, you got the Elite to help start this company. You don't have Bad Luck Fale and Tama Tonga. Like, that wasn't anything anybody was saying. And granted, I think Bullet Club did a great job of rebooting with Jay White as leader. But I don't know. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, I suppose, or at least I'm going to wait and see. But I'm of no desire to see Bullet Club continue when AEW is already so faction heavy.
I agree. I'm going to stay cautiously optimistic, but yeah. I'm not, I feel the same.
And
again over there.
Yeah, it's actually all sorry, wrestling stuff, and it's good. So it's all good, and I just see ratings are out, and they look very similar to last week. It's almost like somebody sent out last week's email, but it's not the case. So, continuing with the show, we got a friggin' burner. International title on the line. Buddy Matthews versus Orange Cassidy. I thought this was the type of match I've needed to see Orange Cassidy have for a while. I like Orange Cassidy matches, I do. But I think that Orange Cassidy, I've wanted to see him have a little bit more of a personal feud for a minute. And I think that, granted, while I don't think that this is necessarily going to be more of a personal feud, I'd liked seeing him in peril with Buddy Matthews. I liked seeing Buddy Matthews taking over Orange Cassidy the way he did, and Orange Cassidy basically surviving Buddy Matthews. I think that this was hotly intense. I think that they got the crowd into it, and I think this is one of those performance Buddy's even needed to have since coming to AEW. What did you think? I was over the moon about this, but how did you feel about this match?
I was too. I really enjoy kind of seeing Orange Cassidy as like a fighting champion. Like he's always coming out of his matches with like some kind of like injury, and it's being worked into like the next match and into the story. So I like that they kind of played on that. Buddy did, like going right after the hands and stuff.
Yeah, so the hand was a big focus of this match. Mm-hmm. And, they even had the trainers take a look at his hand before they continued the match. And they had then Buddy basically go in and work the hand over the entire match. And it seemed like at every turn that Orange Cassidy had the match won, Buddy had an answer for him. And Buddy was really kicking the shit out of Orange Cassidy here, to the point of where Buddy even kicked out of an orange punch, because in this case, when you've worked over the hand, which is what Orange needs for the orange punch, that allows, or that makes for good storytelling, that makes for good drama. And so, an orange punch that isn't as effective because Orange's hand has been worked over, and at the same time, he's also kind of stalling. I thought I was into this. I think this was all great storytelling. And, but Buddy goes to hit Murphy's Law, but Orange Cassidy reverses it into a mousetrap. 1, 2, 3. Orange Cassidy just barely survives Buddy Matthews. I keep saying Buddy Murphy. I've said that multiple times, haven't I? Buddy Matthews. He has survived Buddy Matthews with the international title in hand. I like this a lot.
I do too. And I like pairing him and Buddy together, because I think that Buddy has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle with the House of Black. So I thought it was a really good showing for him too.
Well, the next segment was interesting because, of course, we had heard that Jeff Hardy was backstage. But as I went up and down the show segment-wise, I thought, where the hell does Jeff Hardy even fit on this show? What is he going to interview in the Blackpool Combat Clubs match? That doesn't make any sense. What does Jeff Hardy have to do with anything? And then I see Ethan Page in the ring, and I went, there it is. And Ethan Page talks about the contract that was signed, and Matt Hardy confirms that when Ethan Page signed that contract, Matt Hardy had it slipped in that that if he lost and did not gain the FTW title, that would free Isaiah Cassidy. Well, he said Private Party. They kept saying Private Party. So at least they're keeping Mark Quinn's name alive through all of this in a way. But he said that freed Private Party and Matt Hardy from the clutches of the firm, and that he gets to decide on a match with who and where it takes place. And then out come the firm. They jump Matt Hardy and Isaiah Cassidy. Then out comes Hook for the save, but he gets jumped, and they're continuing to beat them down. And then Jeff Hardy's music hits. Mm-hmm. Doesn't dance to the ring this time, but he's got no dance. But he has a chair with his face painted on it. He takes everybody out. He hits a swanton on Lee Moriarty, and they clear the ring, and they are happy. The fans are into this. Jeff Hardy's back. People are excited. Again, we talked about some of the controversy around this idea that Jeff Hardy's back. But how did you feel about the segment?
I liked the segment. For a while, because I was seeing stuff online about like Hook and like Ethan Page, and I was like, wouldn't it be interesting if like they actually aligned? And Hook came out, and I got a little scared. I was like, oh no. But then I saw him beaten, up in the ring, and I was like, okay, we're good. Hook is safe. I'm a big Hooker fan. I'm a big Hooker. But yeah, I liked seeing.
Hey, whatever floats your boat.
I said it, and I was like, that's yeah. It's it's a thing that I said, but I stand by it. So.
Sorry, I'm reading a little bit more into the. Okay, as long as because I see people talking about it in the chat, and I was like, I don't recall seeing the detail about the soft roster split, possibly being in play. But I see people in the chat talking about that, so I was like, I should probably make sure that's in the story. It is in the story. That is something that's been talked about. That is something that's been rumored. And I guess now that that's out there, that's a thing we can come around to discussing and seeing if that's something that is feasible. I don't know that it is, but that all depends on how the shows play out. Blackpool Combat Club took on Michael Nakazawa and Brandon Cutler. This, by the way, the third time that Michael Nakazawa has faced Jon Moxley on an AEW Dynamite.
It's an interesting tidbit.
Yeah, this has pretty much every time Jon Moxley has been in a rivalry with Kenny Omega, which this is now their third rivalry, Michael Nakazawa has somehow ended up in a match with Jon Moxley. They faced each other one-on-one. They face each other in tag matches. And now here we are. They're facing each other in another tag match. Brandon Cutler, Michael Nakazawa. This match was short, but damn, this was actually sweet. And let me tell you why. There are so many ways this match could have played out.
Mm-hmm.
But Michael Nakazawa and Brandon Cutler are basically known as stooges for the Elite. We know that Brandon Cutler will get his ass beat by anybody you put in front of him. We know that Michael Nakazawa is Michael Nakazawa. He is a bit of a geek in that regard, but he's Kenny's kind of lapdog. And by the way, we did get the Kenny Omega promo from his house talking about the vengeance, and we got that shot of Don Callis's injury. Oof. But man, there were so many cool things here. One, I agree with the chat. Bloodying Brandon Cutler was a visual I didn't realize I needed, because Brandon Cutler being bloody under his mask and seeing the clear mask pull up with blood is such a cool visual. Also, everybody no-selling his punches was also great. This was just a serious, good beatdown of Michael Nakazawa and Brandon Cutler. Now, one might ask the question, why the hell, if the Elite were in the building, would they have let this happen to their friends for this long? It was only a 3-minute beatdown, but that's like 3 minutes too long when you think about the fact that Kenny was actually there and the Bucks were actually there. I was surprised to see Matt Jackson. But thank you, Pile Driver Finisher, for that, for pointing that out. I would probably just use my mute button for that. But just talking about this being short and sweet and really telling the story of how dangerous the Blackpool Combat Club is, but thinking about Michael Nakazawa and Brandon Cutler wanting to stand up for their friends, I actually did like this. And of course, we knew who was going to get the victory. They did. How did you feel about this?
So I was interested to see how it was going to go because, like you said, it could have went a lot of ways. I was like, it's either going to be like a 30-second squash or like they're going to get a little bit of offense or something. Especially, I mean, I watched BTE, so I saw like Cutler doing like training and stuff on BTE. So I was really interested to see how it was going to play out. I liked the match. I liked the bloody Cutler and the mask. I thought that was cool. But I was interested to see who was going to come out and make the save because I figured somebody was going to. I was like, are we going to get Hangman with like an eye patch? I was not expecting to see Kenny. I was expecting to see the Bucks.
I mean, you should have expected to see the Bucks because
of course,
you
that's
watched. Well, that and if you watch the end of BTE, they saw what happened to Hangman and they decided to get up off their couches, and I think the implication was always that they were on their way to Dynamite. But yeah, Kenny's music hit first, and Kenny distracted them on the stage while the Bucks then came in from behind, hit a super kick, and then Kenny grabs the toolbox from under the ring, and they hand him a screwdriver, and he runs at Moxley with it, stabs the turnbuckle. This was a callback, by the way. For those who might be new to AEW or just don't remember things from 4 years ago, Kenny and Moxley had a match at Full Gear 2019. It was an unsanctioned lights out match in which we saw this exact spot. We saw the spot where they grabbed the screwdriver, ran at the turnbuckle, and jabbed it into the turnbuckle pad. It happened exactly in that fashion, almost the exact same turnbuckle at Full Gear 2019. This was a callback to the old Moxley and Kenny feud from the beginning of AEW.
And you could see it in Mox's face, too. I think he was having a little bit of PTSD from that moment.
Yes. So I thought that was a great callback. I thought that was one of those like little Easter eggs of, oh, thank you for that. I appreciate the reference to the match that actually got AEW fined in the state of Maryland because that match was that violent. So we got a super chat here. RH says, starting late, give me Keith Lee versus the Embassy. Lee versus Brian Cage. V versus Toa Leona. Lee versus Khan. Lee, yes, please. Then Keith Lee versus Swerve at Double or Nothing. You can do all of that. Hell, I mentioned on Grapsody this week that there's other stories you could tell here. That if you guys remember, what pay-per-view was that? Final Battle. It was Swerve and Keith Lee, Swerve in Our Glory versus Shane Taylor Promotions. And a lot of Keith Lee's history with Shane Taylor Promotions was brought up. There happens to be one member of the Mogul Embassy, one Bishop Khan, who was also a member of Shane Taylor Promotions, that you can kind of tie all of that together and maybe tell a story of Keith Lee needing to recruit STP to take on Swerve and the Embassy, and where does Bishop Khan's loyalties lie? He tweeted when he first joined the Embassy that he still got love for Shane Taylor and Shane Taylor Promotions, and that's who put him on the map. But there's a lot you can do with that, and you can honestly then kind of transition that into a Ring of Honor feud between Shane Taylor Promotions and the Embassy for the 6-man titles. So there's things you can do with that, and I think they should play with that as much as they can. Anyway, we then saw a women's tag match. The newly All Elite Sky Blue teaming with Riho to take on Ruby Soho and Toni Storm. Glad we had the same reaction there.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in Groundhog's Day with this feud.
Mm-hmm.
I liked last week. I think Riho and Jamie Hayter tore the house down. But God, this feud feels like it's the same things over and over and over. And Jesus Christ, pin somebody other than Sky Blue. I get it that everybody else needs to be protected, but you literally just all elite at Sky Blue. Do something.
Yeah.
And I even got excited at the idea that, hey, next week they're in Britsburg. Britt Baker, now granted, she's not 100%, but Britt Baker is in her hometown, a place where she's before defended the title against Red Velvet. Like, we've seen other things being done with Britt Baker. And when they announced that it's just a tag match, Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter versus Ruby Soho and Toni Storm, I let out the biggest sigh because you guys don't have any other ideas. I feel like these tag matches and everything that's being done in this feud all feels like it's on repeat.
Especially with like the run-ins too. Like I want I'm tired of the run-ins.
Yeah, I mean they're all going the same way. The matches you can almost set your watch by. Sky Blue will be pinned. There'll be a beatdown after the fact. They'll spray an L on somebody, and then in will run either Jamie Hayter, Britt Baker, whoever's going to make the save. They clear the ring, and that's it. Do something else. Do anything else with this feud. I'm waiting.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm waiting for something else to happen. I don't even want new people because I keep seeing people going, well, maybe they'll bring in Sheeta to this feud. Not if you're not going to do anything new. This feud needs something else.
Yes. I mean, especially when you have so many like heavy hitters involved in this feud and women that have carried your company. Riho, Britt, Jamie, your current champion, Toni, and then you have Saraya, who, you know, she brings a lot of credibility with her name and her presence, but it just feels like everything is just on repeat.
Yeah, I want more, and I love everybody involved here.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to see them doing literally anything else. I even thought that, hey, maybe a surprise pin from Sky Blue with some new confidence because she's all elite now would be kind of a nice way to get her started.
Mm-hmm.
No, but it's not doing anything different. And I was optimistic when they added Ruby Soho that, hey, at least some things are going to get changed up because we have a new heel on that side now. And I thought her promo after Double or Nothing was good. And then I just feel like nothing's happened since. And I want something to happen. Do anything, guys.
I don't think I can handle it.
And then... well, like I said, next week we have another tag match. What's happening there? But yes, and then we had in our main event of the evening. Well, before we get to that, we had a backstage segment. Swerve Strickland was backstage. He was asked about how angry he was over the loss to Darby Allin, and Prince Nana responded that angry. We got what we wanted. And Swerve mentioned how he created Darby Allin. And so Darby beating him proved that it worked. That that's a victory for Swerve. And then he mentioned how, but wait a minute. We've got some unfinished business still, don't we? Hoodies up, and they walked away. What did that mean? I think everybody kind of knew. Keith Lee, one-on-one with Chris Jericho. Keith Lee, of course, in his new look. First time wrestling on Dynamite with a new look. He has a beard that's fully gray. All right. I've seen mileage varying on this match. I've seen a lot of criticism of Keith Lee since this match took place. I will start with you, Haley. How did you feel about the match?
There was criticism, like a lot of criticism.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's been a lot of criticism on Keith Lee and his performance in particular. I want your opinion first. I'll give what some of the thoughts are on it, and then I'll talk about what I thought.
Well,
You first.
I guess I'm in the minority. I liked the match. I'm happy that we get to see Keith Lee on Dynamite again. I missed him. Um, you know, I liked the match. I didn't know that there was some controversy here.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, it's pretty much up for debate. If you look at it on Cage Match, the match currently has a 4.94 rating out of 10, and it's the people have just varying opinions. There are people who have given it an 8, thought it was great. Some people thought it was kind of middle of the road, 6, and then there are people who gave it low 3s, who are just really, really harsh on Keith Lee. And it all has. There have been varying opinions on the match. There's been pretty much a lot of discussion on Keith Lee. Since the match took place, Twitter has kind of lit up about conditioning. I'm feeling like Keith Lee seemed sluggish sluggish in the match, and I'm even seeing people in our chat saying that Keith felt very slow in the match. And coming from a longtime Keith Lee fan, a lot of standing around. I liked the story that the match was telling. And I liked the story of Chris Jericho basically not having a whole lot of answers for what Keith Lee brought to the table. I thought that I really liked the moonsault spot onto Jericho's knees, but what are knees going to do for Keith Lee? Like, they still just smashed Jericho's knees.
Yeah.
I liked that, again, it felt like Keith Lee didn't seem to have, or Chris Jericho just didn't seem to have an answer for a lot of what Keith Lee was doing. But I do agree that the match felt slow. But that said, I don't think it was unenjoyable as a result of it. But I can see the idea of people thinking it was slow. Now, the match nearly ends with Chris Jericho Keith Lee having the match won. He does hit a spirit bomb on Chris Jericho after Chris Jericho attempts a code breaker, and he reverses it into it. But then Daniel Garcia, of course, being at ringside, distracts the ref as Daniel Garcia gets ejected, in-run swerve, and he hits Keith Lee upside the head, allowing Chris Jericho to get the victory. So therefore, Swerve, Strickland, and Keith Lee is a feud that's going to continue and make its way into Double or Nothing. We've got some opinions of the chat, and I'm curious what the chat has to say about all of that. Orion Bin 666 says, I was rooting for Keith Lee to Cole pounce Jericho. Yeah, that would have been dope. Speaking of which, Adam Cole came out after the show and did the exact thing that Chris Jericho did to Adam Cole 2 weeks ago, helping Keith out of the arena and looking back at him while his music played. We got, let me make sure I hit every super chat. I promise you guys, I am not going to leave a super chat behind. Eloquent says, Will, who do you main on Capcom versus SNK? Came right behind me. So Blanca has been my main in pretty much every Street Fighter game that he's available in. So I usually have a team that consists of Blanca. If I'm just going like Street Fighter mode, I'll do Blanca and Akuma, and then I'll usually balance it to where I give my 3 to Blanca and then a 1 to Akuma. But then I also like Terry. Terry's always good. But usually whatever team I put together has to include Blanca. That's like an absolute must for me. And pretty much any Street Fighter game. I'm a Blanca guy. Sorry. Yeah, so show goes off the air with Swerve Strickland having gotten one up on Keith Lee and bringing that story back up. I feel like he was the thread throughout the show. And Adam Cole and Chris Jericho is going to continue. I liked this show. I don't. I've seen some negativity around the show. I've seen some really harsh criticism of the show. But I walked away from the episode going, you know what? This had a couple of matches I really liked in Darby Allin versus Swerve and Orange Cassidy versus Buddy Matthews. And then on top of that, I like that it had a story thread throughout. And my favorite angle in AEW right now in House of Black versus not House of Black, Blackpool Combat Club, excuse me, not a house, we're talking about a club, but the Blackpool Combat Club versus the Elite got to continue. So overall, I was happy with the episode. And that's just, I'm not necessarily like, I'm not gonna go, oh, this is one of the best episodes of Dynamite of the year. Hell, no way. But because they've had some great episodes, especially back in January. But was this a good show? I thought it was, especially the first hour. I thought that the first hour really came through. Really like the Sting, Darby, and MJF segment. This was an episode. However, how did our viewers? How many viewers tuned in, I guess, is the better question. So, AEW Dynamite ratings are in, per usual. And here, again, I joked that it looked about the same as last week's. And let me be sure that's the thing that is accurate. But, let's see. Dynamite. All right, so what last week did what? Last week was 877, and this one was 866. So, almost a negligible difference, down 10,000 viewers. They did a 0.28 in 18 to 49. I think last week was a 0.3. And let me be sure of that. Last week was a 0.3. So, down in both regards. It came in at number 6, which, again, it was last week. And it was outranked by Vanderpump Rules, which it always is, and the 2 NBA games last week, the 2 play-in games. Speaking of which, I don't know if the Nuggets dodged the bullet, folks, or not, but it looks like the Nuggets are either going to be playing the, the Timberwolves or the Oklahoma City Thunder. And let me tell you, folks, I'm pretty good with either one of those two. So we're going to see this week. I don't know. David Reed said, things were set in motion for Double or Nothing. That's how I feel. I tweeted that last night. I thought, we're 6 weeks out from Double or Nothing, and this is kind of the soonest that things have felt in motion for Double or Nothing. One of the criticisms that tends to get thrown at Tony is that a lot of the pay-per-view build tends to come up very close to the pay-per-view. Like sometimes we're 2 weeks out and they're just throwing matches on the show. But, and you know what? I see Nuggets are frauds, and guess what? You're going to be put in timeout for that. Because I don't play about the Denver Nuggets. That's my team. Do I think the Denver Nuggets are going to win an NBA championship this year? Hell, I kind of have to, don't I? But I will be rooting. Look, this is Nuggets territory here on Day After Dynamite. I'll be rooting for the Nuggets all week long, all postseason, I mean. And this weekend, we'll see how things go in Game 1. Haley, make some plugs.
Boy, okay. You guys can follow me on Twitter at @HaleyN_. I do podcasting on Fightful Overbooked as well with Kylie, my co-host. We do Tag Talk at 3 p.m. Eastern Time every Monday. I do like writing and stuff on the side. So if you guys are into like nerdy stuff, I do stuff over at Nerds and Beyond. I'm also working on a cookbook. It's called Eating the Indies. It's featuring a lot of independent wrestlers. I'm doing all the bios and stuff for all of that. So if you guys are interested in that, if there is a wide release, I will post it on my Twitter. But yeah.
That sounds great.
it's a really fun project. You know, I'm happy that I get to do it. I love cooking and I love writing, and wrestling. So it's like all my favorite things combined.
Well, Haley, thank you for doing Day After Dynamite this week. We'll be back next week per usual. Where is next week's show? Next week's show is Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
That should be an interesting one. And yeah, we'll see how things go. Again, FightfulSelect.com has a lot of details on what's the latest on CM Punk and when and where he'll be back. Again, I would say pay attention to that June 21st show they just announced. And that's that. Otherwise, folks, we will see you next time. And all you Go Suns people in the chat, hold up here. All you Go Suns people, look, I know that the Suns are exactly who the Nuggets need to be afraid of. I do. I fully know that, knowing that pretty much since Kevin Durant signed with the Phoenix Suns, that's who the Nuggets need to fear. I know that. But I have faith in my team. I have faith in the reigning MVP. I have faith in Jamal Murray. I have faith in Aaron Gordon. Michael Porter Jr., I don't have faith in him, but I have hope. If that team can find what they found pre-All-Star, the way that they were playing pre-All-Star break, I think they are the team to beat. If they can't find that again, because we know post All-Star, I think they lost 10 out of 17 games. It could turn out to be an issue. We shall see. But either way, I am going to be rooting for my team.
You should.
We'll see you next time, folks. Have a great day. Peace.